Have you ever noticed that sometimes the most explosive person in the story is exactly the one who tried the hardest to be perfect their whole life? Well, Patty Bladell is practically living proof that when the world demands too much, the mind finds some very unusual ways to survive, and that is where the paradox lives. The more she tries to be the ideal version everyone expects, the more she loses herself as if she were paying a very high price just to be seen. The craziest thing is that most people watch Insatiable thinking they understand Patty, but almost no one notices the truth that is hidden there, under the exaggerated attitudes and chaotic decisions, because honestly, she is not about beauty, revenge, or fame. She is about pains no one wants to admit they feel. And if you have ever looked in the mirror and thought, "Why am I never enough?" then you will see yourself completely in her, even without wanting to. There is one detail that makes everything even more intriguing: the way her traumas mix with her desperate search for control, creating choices that seem absurd but make perfect sense to those who understand the language of emotion. And stay with me, because in the next few minutes you will feel as if you were stepping inside her mind and understanding layers the series never explained, but were always there, silently screaming. Actually, you might discover that her chaos is not as far from yours as it seems. If you are a fan of cinema psychology and want to understand the mind behind your favorite character, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss any video. But first, comment below which character you want me to analyze here on the channel. Now let us go to the video. Patty Bladell is that character you look at and think, wow, there is so much happening behind that smile. From an early age, she carried a life full of family and social expectations that felt overwhelming. In the series Insatiable, she appears as someone who constantly feels judged, trying to fit impossible standards. It is easy to relate because who has never felt like the world is looking critically at every detail of your life? This feeling creates fertile ground for very deep internal conflicts. She grew up in a family that subtly pressured appearance and success without realizing the weight they placed on her shoulders. Every comment, every look seemed to weigh tons, shaping the way Patty saw herself and what she believed she deserved. Just imagine spending your entire life hearing "you should be more," double quotes. This creates constant self-criticism, almost like a buzzing in your head that never stops. It is not an exaggeration to say this defines much of her behavior in the series. Patty has that posture that mixes charm with insecurity, a way of appearing confident while everything inside is turbulent. She tries to protect herself from the world with irony and sarcasm, but in private, feelings of inadequacy dominate. It is as if she is always on a stage performing a version of herself that pleases others, while the real Patty stays hidden backstage, who has never done that at a dinner or a party. It is universal. Her past, full of veiled criticism and constant comparison with other people, creates a sort of silent anxiety. Patty feels she needs to earn approval constantly, and that leads her to push herself to the limit, often sabotaging herself without realizing it. It is like running on a treadmill without stopping. The effort is intense, but the destination always seems to slip away. This search for external acceptance shapes not only her choices, but also the way she interacts with others. Even when she achieves something, the feeling of emptiness insists on showing up. This is not rare for someone living under constant pressure. Achievement should bring joy, but the fear of not being enough cancels everything. Patty learns to associate achievement with momentary relief, creating cycles of frustration and continuous effort. It is a pattern that manifests subtly but deeply in her daily life. And of course, all this affects her relationships with friends and colleagues, who often only see the surface. Patty may seem distant, sarcastic, or even manipulative, but behind that there is a desperate search for real connection. When we relate to someone like that, we notice how internal pain can translate into behaviors that confuse or push others away. It is a reminder that we all have hidden layers. Her humor, which is sometimes sharp, is actually an armor. It allows her to deal with her own vulnerability, and it is almost impossible not to feel empathy. Who has never used a joke to hide shame or sadness? Patty shows that laughing at yourself can be a survival tool, but it also reveals that something deeper needs attention. It is a delicate game between defense and expression. And finally, it is impossible to talk about Patty without noticing that each gesture and reaction carries echoes of the past and the expectations that shaped her. Everything she does, from simple choices to big decisions, is filtered through this lens of insecurity and desire for acceptance. And it is exactly this set of experiences that leads us to the next topic, the traumas and internal conflicts she faces daily, and how they shape her deepest attitudes. Self-esteem issues. Patty deals with fragile self-esteem that seems to dance between moments of false confidence and intense insecurity. She tries to appear secure, but every compliment or criticism is filtered through a lens of internal doubt. She is that type of person who smiles when complimented, but immediately thinks, are they being sincere? Who has never felt like that? A little suspicious of a compliment even knowing you deserve it. This emotional roller coaster defines much of her behavior. This low self-esteem has deep roots, grounded in constant comparisons during adolescence. Patty watched peers and relatives and always found her own flaws to magnify. It was as if she were always competing against an idealized version of herself, impossible to reach. And this creates a pattern. Every step forward comes with an invisible weight she carries alone, creating constant silent tension. In daily life, this manifests as self-sabotage. Patty avoids situations in which she believes she might be judged, or exposes herself in exaggerated ways to try to control how others perceive her. It is a hard cycle to break. The more she tries to prove herself, the more inadequate she feels. This pattern is something many viewers recognize in themselves. That internal battle between wanting to shine and being afraid of critical eyes, the way she sees herself also influences her social interactions. Patty often puts herself in a state of alert, interpreting criticism or silence as personal attacks. She becomes hypersensitive to feedback, even when innocent, and this ends up shaping complicated relationships. It is a reminder that self-esteem does not only affect how we feel internally, but also how we navigate the world and the people around us. She also deals with the feeling of invisibility, even when she is the center of attention. Low self-esteem creates a distorted perception. Achievements and qualities are minimized or ignored, while mistakes and failures are amplified. Patty then constantly finds herself questioning her worth, a process that slowly corrodes confidence and spontaneity, leaving behind anxiety and self-pressure. The impact of this on bigger decisions is huge. Whether in relationships, career, or personal choices, Patty often hesitates or chooses safe paths to avoid criticism. Every step is calculated to protect her fragile self-image, but at the same time, this limits her potential to explore new and gratifying experiences. It is like trying to dance in an emotional minefield. Any wrong move feels too risky. The most human side of this is that despite all the internal struggle, Patty still seeks connection and recognition. She wants to feel valid, appreciated, and often shows affection in subtle ways, trying to prove to herself and others that she deserves attention. This vulnerability makes her story relatable. We have all felt small at some point, wishing someone would see our real value. And it is exactly this constant battle with self-esteem that leads her to other behaviors, like binge eating, which is not only about food but about seeking comfort and control amid internal chaos. Every plate, every impulsive choice carries emotional layers that reflect her internal struggles, opening space for the next topic we will explore: binge eating. Patty's binge eating goes far beyond food. It is a direct reflection of the emotional whirlwind she carries. Eating becomes a refuge, a moment of control in a world where she feels almost nothing is under her command. Imagine being in a drifting boat and finding a buoy that offers momentary relief. That is exactly how she feels with each impulsive bite. And of course, this creates a cycle that is hard to break. Each binge episode is followed by guilt and shame, which reinforce the negative perception she has of herself. It is a vicious cycle. She feels anxiety, eats to relieve it, feels guilty for eating, then feels more anxiety. This pattern is something many viewers can recognize, even at different levels, and that is exactly what creates identification with Patty. It is painful and at the same time human. The family and social context in which she grew up also amplifies this relationship with food. Comments about weight, comparison with others, and unrealistic expectations turn into invisible triggers. Patty is not just eating, she is searching for emotional comfort, a hug she never truly received. And that explains why certain scenes in the series are so impactful. Food carries deep emotional symbolism. Binge eating also appears in moments of stress or frustration, functioning as an escape valve. For Patty, a piece of cake or a pack of cookies is more than flavor, it is an emotional survival mechanism. This helps explain why the behavior is not simply about gluttony. It is about dealing with emotions she does not know how to express in other ways. Who has never had a chocolate day as a form of comfort? Besides that, the effect on self-esteem is enormous. Each binge episode feeds feelings of inadequacy, as if she were failing herself. Patty finds herself stuck in a spiral where the attempt to find comfort creates more discomfort. And this affects not only her relationship with food, but with her body and self-image. It is a cycle that affects body, mind, and emotions. On the other hand, these crises also reveal a very human part of her, the attempt to care for herself, even in a dysfunctional way. Patty seeks satisfaction and relief, showing that behind each self-destructive behavior, there is a legitimate need for love and acceptance. Recognizing this is essential to understand the complexity of the character and why so many people identify with her. The dynamic between binge eating and self-esteem creates moments of extreme vulnerability, but also silent resilience. Each episode is an internal battle, and Patty, even without realizing it, teaches us about the complexity of human emotions. It is a reminder that our behaviors often carry messages about unresolved pain, much more than what appears on the surface. And it is exactly this complicated relationship with food that leads us to observe how all her traumas, insecurities, and internal conflicts intertwine, shaping her choices and behavior in the series. This is the starting point to understand how these layers affect every interaction Patty has, and how she navigates her world full of judgment and expectation. All these internal conflicts shape the way Patty sees the world, how she reacts, and especially how she chooses her paths. She walks through life like someone trying to dance on a slippery floor. Any step could turn into a stumble. This makes Patty make impulsive decisions, always searching for a quick feeling of validation. Who has never made a decision in the heat of the moment just to feel relief? That is exactly how her emotional map works. The constant need for approval turns Patty into someone who lives in performance mode. She adapts, changes, exaggerates, performs, all to make sure no one sees the chaos that exists inside. It even seems like she is always holding a script, trying to guess which line pleases the audience the most. Deep down, this theatricality comes from fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, and then her behavior becomes full of highs and lows. In certain moments, Patty shows almost theatrical confidence, a bold posture that impresses, but a single criticism, a poorly placed comment, and everything collapses like a house of cards. It is the kind of reaction that happens when someone tries to build self-confidence on unstable ground. The shell is hard, but the inside is pure glass. The way she relates to others also changes. Patty seeks people who make her feel something she cannot sustain on her own, value, and often she ends up entering confusing or even toxic relationships, trying to fill emotional holes that low self-esteem left open. It is like trying to patch a leak with tape. It holds for a while, but does not solve it. This generates conflicts, impulsive decisions, and emotional dependencies that shape her connections. Professionally and socially, she becomes someone who takes exaggerated risks. When Patty feels she needs to prove something, she doubles down, even when that puts her peace of mind on the line. It is that logic of, if it goes wrong, at least I tried to impress. This pattern generates both iconic moments and emotional tragedies, because she acts more from pain than clarity. And of course, her binge eating and fragile self-esteem are not separate from her choices. They influence everything. When she feels bad about herself, her decisions become more impulsive. When she feels in control, she acts as if she conquered the world. Her personality is built in oscillating layers, like someone trying to balance a glass of water filled to the brim while running. It is interesting to see that Patty also develops a sharp sense of humor, almost as a defense mechanism to deal with her own ghosts. This sarcasm works as an emotional shield, helping her keep distance from situations that make her vulnerable. Anyone who uses humor as protection will recognize this movement instantly. She turns pain into a joke, just to avoid letting the pain consume her. And as these traits accumulate, it becomes increasingly clear that her story is far from superficial. Every aspect of Patty's personality is a direct result of years trying to survive emotionally, seeking control, seeking love, avoiding rejection. And this is the moment when a new perspective on her actions emerges, creating curiosity to dive even deeper into her emotional layers in the next chapters of the analysis. So tell me, how did this dive into Patty's mind hit you? What surprised you the most about her? Sometimes understanding what drives a character like this makes us see our own patterns with a clarity we did not expect. And I am curious to know which part of this analysis hit you the hardest, the one that made you think, wow, this speaks directly to me. I also want to know which character you want me to break down in the next video. Who is the next name you want to see here? Going through this emotional magnifying glass that reveals what the series does not show. It can be someone from Insatiable or any other story you loved. Tell me, and I will prepare another deep journey like this. And of course, if you enjoyed this content and want to keep understanding the minds of the most complex characters in fiction in a light, direct, and non-superficial way, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you do not miss any new video, because there is a lot of powerful analysis coming and I want you with me in each one of them.